And they let me go home, but they said, Barry, we don't think we can do anything more for you. And all of a sudden, this pain and anguish I was going through said, okay, now I'm going home to die. And he prescribed me some pills to take, because I could fake it. And the next morning I said, honey, I'm going in to die. I'm going to be sitting in that chair. Do you mind coming and being there while I die? And I took, I just chugged the bottles.
Unpacking Mormonism and other religious trauma is meant for educational purposes only. Hello, and welcome back to Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. I am very excited to be here today with Masons and my college professor, Barry Richins. Hi, Barry. How are you?
Hi. It's nice to be here, sweetheart. And I'm going to call you that because, first of all, I'm in the... My wife told me I should never call people that. And I said, why? She says, you're talking down to them. I said, oh, hell. But you get to be 82, you can say anything like that. I go to the cash register, I thank you, darling. And I go, uh-huh.
I think you called me sweetheart when I was in your English class. Yeah, and when we were in the plays together.
Or looking down, or condescendingly. I just meant it. I didn't have
Sarah calls everybody hun, so I think it's okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like I didn't have a word to say for someone I liked, and especially a girl. I could say to Mason, I could teasingly say, "Hey, you little brat," which meant I really like you, and I'm being closer to you than I would probably be with other people. But with the girls, I would say that too, but sometimes I say, thank you, sweetheart, or something like that. Not all, it just meant you're important. That's all.
Yeah, I love it. Those terms of endearment, they're wonderful. So how many plays did we end up doing together at NPC?
Was it 3 or 4? I know, Mason, you were in Little Abner, weren't you?
I was, yeah.
Yeah, my son and I were there. My son came back from high school. His mother and I were divorced, and so she moved to Kingman, Arizona, which is 250 miles away.
Eric tried to call me twice now. I'm going to go ahead and pick up and just make sure everything's okay.
Okay, that sounds good. I was wondering what the buzzing was.
Anyway, so he wanted to be an athlete, but he didn't make it in athletics, so he joined the drama club there at Kingman, and he became a pretty good high school actor. And I told him, I said, sweetheart, if you come over and live here with me, you can go to the college where I teach, and you'll have tuition for free, because that's one of the perks of being a father and a college professor. And I said, so one day we were doing a really weird one called The Foreigner. It was a summer school. And my son played a really wicked redneck guy. And he said, Dad, he said, I need another actor for this stage. And I said, what do you want? I said, I don't want to learn any lines. He said, no, just come and put this robe on and stand here with a rifle. So I was dressed up as a KKK guy and holding a rifle. Wow. And he got me back in drama. And so by the time my career finished at the college, I think I've been in 19 or 20 plays. Wow. And I think 2 or 3 of them, I was in Little Abner with Mason, and I was in It's a Good Life, and we were also in Annie.
Yep, we did Annie together. Mason and I played Rooster and Rooster's girlfriend, whose name I can't remember right now.
I just watched that just the other day by accident. It came on Facebook or something like that, and it was so fun to watch that.
Was it our play?
Yeah. No. It was Carol Burnett and the kids.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I was like, wait, did somebody record us that I didn't know about? So yeah, we've got Annie.
Easy Street,
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then we did It's a Wonderful Life, and Mason and I were the leads in that. I'm trying to remember what else.
I played the uncle in that, the guy that lost the money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't remember his name anymore. But
I don't remember names. I'm terrible with names. And then Mason and I did together. Oh goodness, not the trap door, Death Trap. We did that one together. There were only 5 of us, and then Mason and I did Pump Boys and Dinettes together as well.
yes, I saw that one, but I wasn't in it.
Yeah, that was a smaller cast. Like both of those, the Death Trap, I want to say there were 5 of us, and then Pump Boys and Dinettes, I think there were 6 of us.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Didn't Mason have to play his guitar too, or something like
He
that?
did. Mason played his guitar in that one, and then I was there. So I was Rhonda, opposite of Steve Mayer. Steve Mayer played my boyfriend, and I got to kick him in the chest, and that felt really good for me. I got to kick him in.
Well, Steve will probably be listening to this one of these days, and he'll say, "Yeah, it didn't hurt."
Yeah, he'll say that. Well, I probably didn't hurt. I didn't try to hurt him. But Mason's sister, Bobby, and I were in that. She played the other female. Maybe there were 3. Maybe it was only 5 of us because it was 2 females.
Was one the waitress or the?
We were both waitresses. Yeah, Rhonda and Bobby's character were both waitresses, but we learned how to tap dance for that production.
You know, I always wanted to tap dance.
Yeah.
Always wanted. I never knew how, so I still, in my dreams, I still tap dance.
Well,
honest to goodness.
All I've got to say is you really only move your feet, and it is exhausting, but it's a lot of fun. Hey, head on over to Amazon and buy your copy of Trauma Bonded, a true story of navigating attachments forged in complex PTSD by me, Sarah Westbrook.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? The things you know make you feel better even when it's impossible to make time for them. Like that workout you try to squeeze in between kids' activities, work, and everything else you have going on, and before you know it, it gets pushed to tomorrow. Sound familiar? But it's the moments when you feel like you have no time for yourself when those non-negotiables are more important than ever. Those are the things that keep you strong, healthy, motivated, and prepared to take on everything life demands of you. So why not make therapy one of them? BetterHelp Online Therapy makes it easy to get started with affordable phone, video, or live chat sessions you can do from anywhere, and the option to message your therapist between sessions if anything comes up. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.
You know, I'm an old man. And there's a funny thing about being old is that we don't get wiser as we grow older. We might get a little bit more intelligent in that we can make some better choices. But in my mind, high school's that far away. I hear a song, I know who I was dancing with. But the fact is that as we get a little bit older, we think. I don't think the church is that bright. I don't think that they did any of that stuff that someone sat down and wrote a pattern. Here's how we're going to manage the people. Right. But I think what happens is but we still have an organization where we all had to think the same. And it wasn't, no one said it. It was just, that's what happens when you're inbred. And that's what happens when you're a member of a group. We start dressing alike. We start thinking alike. We start asking questions alike. And I'll remember one time I was asking a sister-in-law, we were talking about boxing. And I said to her, what do you think about that? And she said, I don't know. I don't know much about boxing. I wonder what the prophet thinks. Oh, no. She said, I wonder what the church thinks about boxing. And that was where she would have gotten her opinion. If they'd given a proper opinion, she would have accepted it. So I don't think anybody is that bright, and I don't believe in great. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm a skeptic, and I don't believe in great conspiracies. About the biggest conspiracy you can have to have it work very long is probably maybe 10 or 15 people, and maybe that's too large. So, but I believe that we inherited a system started by a liar, starting by a man who took advantage of women, and he was power happy because no man marries himself to the wives of 11 men who are still living without
Right.
wanting to say, screw you, the old European sign, the cuckold sign. I have power over you. And so we married a man who was a sexual deviant. We married a man who was a habitual liar. I mean, excuse me. We believed in a man who was a habitual liar, and his successor, Brigham Young, at least for those of us who called ourselves the Brighamites, who went west with one of the groups that broke off, and there were a number. Brigham was every bit as much narcissistic and sociopathic as Joseph Smith was. So we inherited that system where you tell lies to the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sarah, Mason and Sarah, when I was about 21, maybe 20, we got kicked out of Mexico. All of the Anglo missionaries, the North American missionaries, and European missionaries got kicked out of Mexico because we were down there on the wrong passport. And we didn't have to have passports. We had to have tourist visas, and we'd get in, and every 6 months or so, someone would have to go to the border and get our visas renewed. So every 6 months, we'd have to go do that. Well, there was a revolution in Mexico in about 1914, 15, 16, around in that time. And after the revolution, the Mexican government needed more money, and at least a third of the country of Mexico's arable land, so that would have been the taxable land too, was controlled by the Catholic Church. Over the years, people had willed their money, their land to them, kind of to get a better foothold in heaven. And so the Mexicans said, we're tired of foreign priests coming to Mexico to preach. We're tired, and most of them were Catholic priests that would come out of Europe, especially Spain, Italy, and Austria. And so they said it's against the law for anybody other than the Mexican government to own a church. So the Mexican government took over every Catholic church, every Protestant church, every Mormon church, legally belonged to the government, because they were tired of the power that outside sources had in Mexico. And they made it illegal for the Catholic Church. They didn't mind the Catholic priests, but they had to be Mexican born and raised and taught, Mexican seminarians. Well, we Mormons were foreigners. We came as missionaries. We were there illegally. And how do I know that? Well, I went to school there. I studied in Mexico City before I ever went on a mission. And I knew the history. And so I spent 5 months of my mission from 1961 to 62, 5 months of it in Arizona. When we finally got back to Mexico, the government had Mexico, the church and the church government, the church and the lawyers and the Mexican lawyers had come to an agreement. So when I got my new visa, was called, and it was good for the time I was on my mission, or the time I had left on my mission. But whenever I got it, I had to sign it, and it was a legal document. And so what I found out was that I was not a Mormon missionary. I was an employee of the Mutual Improvement Association, and my job was I was a dance teacher.
Oh.
And so I had lied for the Lord. And I thought, how clever. Isn't that cute? Boy, that church has got
I couldn't find that name in your contacts.
Oh.
Do you have their phone number?
Alexa, off.
Thank you, Alexa, for
Alexa
chiming
just really
in.
wants to be a part of this, yeah.
Anyway, I thought that was really clever. And so, but years later, I thought about it, and what I had done, I had perjured myself. And if I had been picked up legally, the Mexican government could have put me in jail. So by signing that, the church made me a perjurer and a criminal, and a potential criminal, and I could have been in a different room. But
And
I
the
had
church wouldn't have come for you either. The church did the lying, but they wouldn't have come for you.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what they would have done. But the fact was, is that as far as I knew, from my personal experience was, I had lied for the Lord, and I was happy and proud to have done it.
Right. I was going to say Elder Holland talked about doing that. So Jeffrey R. Holland talked about crossing the Iron Curtain after World War II, and that he was disobeying the law in many ways every time he went over there, and yet they glorified it as this wonderful thing. And I wonder how many people maybe got caught that they don't talk about. You know, what happened to the people that were victims of this, and did you even know about them? Because when Germany was, split, was it East and West Germany, Mason? Help me remember.
Yeah, East and West
Yeah,
Germany,
well,
East and West
Yeah.
Berlin.
So before the wall fell, they talk about the advances of bringing in a temple and church congregations and all of these other things and serving the people. But we also believe in obeying the law of the land. And so we're glorifying doing something illegal. And he can only tell that story now because the
Right.
wall has fallen and the war is over.
I think that was Thomas Monson who did much of that work there.
You're correct.
Yes.
That was.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Monson.
You're correct.
And I'm familiar with the story. You remember that part in the temple where you say, you can get anything in this world for money.
Mhm.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, this was kind of the movement you do in Mexico. That meant la mordita. You take a bite. And so when I would go to the border and I didn't want to take very much time to get back in because I was a traveling elder and I had to come in and out of Mexico sometimes, I just paid the guys a couple of extra dollars to not open my trunk, and so I could just get through a little bit faster. And when you have a lot of poor people who are doing those kind of jobs, you can do that. And so I think that probably what they were doing, they were greasing somebody's palm.
Oh, I'm sure.
And because that was what they were doing in Mexico.
Yeah.
And
Did
my
you
mission-
have the same over baptism or lying about the baptisms that you were doing the way that John Dehlin reports when he was in Mexico?
No, he was in Guatemala.
Okay.
No, my mission president, I still remember him with great pride, and I loved him dearly. The only thing I felt bad about is when I had my mental breakdown on my mission. He didn't have the power of discernment to figure out what had happened. And so in time, I thought, well, geez, my anguish was horrible, and it was tremendous.
Would
And
you
I
mind
thought-
sharing that story with us?
Yeah, I'd been on my mission about 2.5 years, about a year and a half. It was a 2.5 year mission because there was no language training then. I went in 1961. And anyway, when my mission president was a delightful man, and I liked him very much. And I was pretty successful in the mission, and I learned Spanish really fast. I had been really a poor Spanish student before that at college. I got a D the first semester and F the second semester. But when I finally got to Mexico as a missionary, I thought, I'm going to really, really settle down. I'm going to really learn this stuff. And I did. I worked. That's probably why my Levi's still don't fit me, because I must have worked my butt off. Because anyway, I worked hard, and so I became kind of a poster boy, and I really liked him, and I liked my mission companions, and it was the first time in my life that I started feeling like I was somebody, because people said, "Oh, Elder Richins, you're so smart," and I'm going, "What? Maybe I am, yeah, just maybe I am," and so I worked hard, and but I was starting to feel some depression, because there's a lot of pressure of being on a mission.
Yeah.
And I had a missionary companion, and he and I were walking around one day. We didn't go out to proselytize that day. We just went for a walk down at the river, and it was summertime in Mexico, so I'm sure it was 110, 111, 112.
Sweltering.
And we were out there walking around in this heat, and that heat beats you to death. Just and when we got home, he'd said, "Elder Richins, would you mind if we just went for a walk today, and rather than going out tracting?" And I said, "Yeah, let's go," because I was feeling some depression myself. I was feeling kind of low. And when we got home from that walk, he said, "Elder," he said, "I don't belong here. I don't believe. I've got to go home."
Wow.
And that shocked me. I'd never been around that, never seen that, didn't know you could do that or could feel that way. And it really shocked me. And so I called the mission president. He said, "Well, bring him up to the mission home." And it's about 300 or 400 miles away from where I was, and so I had to take him on a bus, and we went up to let him go. And while I was there, the mission cook, as a traveling elder, I'd spent a lot of time in the mission home. And the cook said, "Oh, Elder Richins, I know why you're here." I said, "Why?" He said, "You're going to be the new AP." I wanted to be the AP really badly because that was prestige.
That's right.
And I said, "No, I don't think so," because I just brought I didn't tell her why, but I said, but I knew. I said, "I just brought that kid up to send him home because he was upset. He was mentally, physically upset. He was one of the brightest guys I'd ever met."
Did he ever share with you why he no longer believed? Did he give you any of that information?
Yeah, he did. And what started his crack was the story about the barge, and where he said, if you're going to have to make it a small tight hole, because if it were a window, it would shatter and break. And he knew this kid had gotten a 4 at BYU, and he knew that there wasn't glass in those times, and so he couldn't have been that. And so that bothered him, and I guess it festered. And then pretty soon, we'd been companions about a month and a half or so, and all of a sudden he couldn't go any further.
Yeah.
The funny thing about cognitive dissonance, you can only carry it so long, or it'll start killing you.
Yeah, there's actually research that demonstrates that when you are in that type of conflict, it creates inflammation throughout the body from overproduction of stress hormones, so cortisol and adrenaline, and it literally causes disease. And the first thing that it attacks is your immune system, and the second thing it attacks is your cardiovascular system.
Oh yeah, it must, because anyway. So while I was there, I got a companion, one of the Udalls from St. John's, and I was so excited. I got this new companion. I said, "Let's go back and let's go to work," because I still wanted to be a really good missionary, although I had been feeling some depression, but I didn't know what it meant or whatever. But I don't know if any of you have ever had a depression that kind of starts as a slow downward cycle. That's kind of what it felt to me. So we got part of the way down, and we stopped in a town called Los Mochis that I had worked in, and I was the zone leader. And so I said, "Well, Elder, let's stop in here and stay overnight with the elders." And they were going to have a branch party that night, and I loved the people in the branch because I'd been there, so we had a wonderful party. And my companion and I slept on, the elders had a double bed and had two mattresses on. They pulled one off and threw it on the floor, and we slept on that one. And I woke up in the morning, and I was just looking at the ceiling. And my body told me, nothing's the same. Something's wrong, Barry. All of a sudden, I had these inklings that I was broken. Mm-hmm. And I knew that something was really wrong, but I didn't know what it was. So we got up later, and I said, "Elder, let's get back to our little town," which is about 40 miles away. And we got on the bus and went down there. And I said, "Let's go right out and tract." And so we started tracting. And all of a sudden, my legs turned to rubber. My body starts to shake. And I was suffering from anxiety. And I had no idea what was wrong with me. And that scared me awfully. Yeah. Because I had no reference to anything. And then I said, well, Elder, I think we got to go home. So we went home, and I sat there for a while and dealing with my guilt. Just go out and try again. Had to go home. And I tried that for 2 or 3 days, and pretty soon I was a complete wreck, and I was feeling suicidal. And tell you, I was scared. I had no idea what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 30 years later I was talking to my psychologist, and she said, Barry, you had a nervous breakdown. I said, that's what happened?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, what was it, nervous or physical? She said, doesn't matter.
Both.
She says, when the body or the mind can take no more, it shuts down. And she said, you dissociated with your body.
Yeah. So I'd like to say a little bit of that for our audience, from the mental health perspective. So Barry, you talk about kind of spiraling very slowly. That's actually pretty common. I would say it's not impossible, but it's more rare for somebody to just be happy one day and then wake up the next in a deep depression and have it hit you out of nowhere. And, I know so I also had a nervous breakdown. That was the catalyst for me basically leaving the church. But what had happened for me was there had always been that stigma of depression being your fault. So whoever was depressed, it was their fault that they were depressed. And I don't know if it came from my Mormon upbringing or just from my parents, but it was people who are depressed are lazy. And so if they would just get up and work harder, then they wouldn't be depressed anymore. And so I remember as I started, so mine kind of triggered that slow cycle. I had a triggering event for me. Mason and I lost twins, and he and I grieved vastly differently. And so I felt very alone as I was grieving that. And because it made me tired. So when you have depression or anxiety, you're going to have physiological symptoms. It's normal for your body to start to break down. And over time, that inflammation can cause, all kinds of things. It can cause psychotic breaks. It can cause nervous system issues. It can lead to autoimmune disorders. Like there's a lot to be said about our mental health being a catalyst for poor physical health and vice versa. And so for me, as I was getting depressed, instead of listening to my body and slowing down and taking care of myself, I was working harder. And so it was shortly after we lost the twins. Mason was the first counselor in our bishopric. I was the primary president. I got released from being the primary president and immediately called in to teach early morning seminary. I had asked my bishop for a break because I was getting ready to do my practicum for my master's degree. And so I was entering the workforce for at least 20 hours a week. And I was like, hey, I've got kids. I've got special needs kids. I cannot continue to be in leadership. Mason's starting medical school. Like, I need a break. So I get released from primary presidency. And the bishop gave me 2 weeks off. And then I got called to teach early morning seminary. And that calling is by far and away the most busy calling I've ever had. I was lesson planning every day, getting up before the crack of dawn. I had the seminary students actually came to our house, which was nice because I still had babies asleep. I think our youngest at that time, Landon, would have been what, Mason? 2, 3? Little.
Yeah.
He'd have been little. Yeah, our youngest at that time. Yeah. And I just threw myself into church service and my work and my studies. And anytime that depression would kind of try and pop up, I'd be like, no, let's push that down. And then I would work harder. And what I really needed was to rest. And so what I hear you talking about, Barry, is that on your mission, there was a lot of pressure to perform. You were there on false pretenses, which I'm sure caused some underlying anxiety about what if I get arrested, what's going to happen.
That thought never occurred to me because that hadn't happened yet.
Oh, that hadn't happened yet. Okay. So anyway, it's normal for us to try and push through it and ignore those symptoms that something is wrong, which will then inevitably lead to complete and utter overwhelm. And I don't know about you, Barry, but for me, I could not read or learn anything new. Like I could not track the lines on a page to comprehend what I was reading for, I don't know, Mace, what, 6 months to a year? Like I couldn't. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
The mighty and resilient Merrimack River, carving through the communities of our great region. My name is Linda Lorden, proud president of Merrimack County Savings Bank, and like the river that serves as our namesake, we're a constant yet ever-changing presence. Because to us, it's bigger than banking. It's about powering communities and putting people first. It's about knowing where you came from and where you're going. That's Merrimack style. Visit us at themerrimack.com.
So Mason, is our son okay?
Yeah, he was at practice and bit through his lip, almost through his lip.
Again.
Yeah, so it's just the inside that's torn.
While I was shaving this morning, I cut the bottom of my lip, so I had to stop it with toilet paper, to get it to stop the bleeding.
Yeah,
so
our
he's
oldest. Go ahead,
He's
Mason.
gonna be okay, I imagine. But I just told him, to keep it clean, and he's gonna send me a picture. And so I just noticed too that Barry, your tag says Barry Richins, Richcins.
Oh,
You might want to change that.
how do I do that?
I gotcha right here. I can do it.
Can you do it, Sarah? Okay.
I can.
I thought I did it fast,
There
and
you
I got
go.
it.
Boom! It's done.
And I didn't look at it. I just kind of did it really fast. Okay, Barry Richins. Yeah.
It's a good thing you don't have a degree in like English or writing or anything
Spanish,
like that, right?
Communications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because it would be really embarrassing if that was the case.
Yeah. Well, I are an English professor, but I didn't knew what I was doing. So anyway.
I felt that way for the first, I don't even know, 3 or 4 years of my professional practice. I would walk away and be like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with this? And I really had to grow into it. They're not kidding when they say experience is truly the best teacher.
Well, we're always freshmen.
Yes.
Right.
Even when we get out of graduate school, then we got to go do something new. And so when we get to the place where we're going to work or what we're going to do, we're neophytes. And the fact is that we're starting all over. And I had no idea about teaching, even though I think I spent at least 10 years of my life in college, but every time you start a new profession, you start at the bottom. And yeah, I think I became an English teacher, really an English teacher, about maybe 5 or 10 years into my career, when all of a sudden things I was teaching them started making sense to me. So it's kind of unusual how that happens, Sarah. And yeah, that's what my wife, who is a psychologist, told me. She said, "Yeah, I have my doctorate, but all of a sudden I'm starting all over. I don't know any of this stuff. I'm just going to try to put this theory to work." And I think you kind of like being a member of a church. You kind of have to get a testimony of what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, and
Experience
with the church. Yeah, with the church though, you have what is it, the cycle, the loop. Oh goodness, my words are escaping me right now. You've got this positive loop of feedback that reinforces that as long as you're doing it the same as everybody else before you did it, you're golden. But if you step outside of that circle, you're in trouble. But yeah, I start my doctorate in about 3 weeks. So really excited about.
Well, I understand you have MS, and my wife got MS just about the time she was finishing her dissertation about 25 years ago or so. And be really careful with yourself because the energy and you know that better than I do. All I know is that her energy just stopped bleeding and going.
Yeah, the doctors actually just prescribed modafinil for me, and it has been an amazing change. I feel like the old Sarah again. I have energy at the end of the day, which I love. So I'm going to take advantage of
Yeah, it's
that
been
for
nice.
as long as it lasts.
There's no one way to have MS, so
Right.
as far as I know. So good luck, my friend.
Well, thank you. I'm excited about that. So Barry, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experiences within Mormonism? Because I find it very interesting. When the three of us were together, you as our professor, and then our peer in the theater department at NPC, and then now later, I would have never guessed that you had left Mormonism. In fact, I don't think I recognized that you had left Mormonism until I saw you chime in on either a Mormonism Live or a Mormon Stories Facebook thread. And I went, I know that guy.
I think
And
it
I
was
was
Facebook.
shocked.
And I wanted to make sure it was you,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the last time I'd had contact with you, you had written a Mormon, a little blurb for a newspaper, or I don't know if they put it in Church News or something, about
Enzyme.
The enzyme.
losing a tire or something and
Mm-hmm.
having it missing. And so Barbara and I had some money, and I can't remember whether we sent you $500 or just $100. But I remember we said, let's find it there. And you guys, I think, were in El Paso, and so we sent you some money because I thought, damn, it's hard to be young and without money and trying to start a family. And the fact was, is when you left the college, you were making more per hour than I was, Mason, as a mailman. And I thought, little shit, geez, here I worked all these years in college and graduate school, and here's my buddy over there driving a new car and big house. I'm going, hell, I'm just barely making it.
Yeah. I think
If
both
it'll
of our
help you, it didn't persist.
Yeah, and then I
well,
heard
It took me almost 4 months in the military to make what I was making 1 month every month before that. So yeah, it was a big change for us.
I bet. And so Barbara and I thought, well, we'll send them over some money to help it. And Sarah said she didn't remember ever getting it. Do you remember me ever sending you guys some money?
So if you sent it to us when we were in El Paso, what I do remember is my bishop came to me and said, here's money. And it was $500. And he wouldn't tell me who it was from. And so I'm wondering if you maybe sent it to our bishop because you didn't have our address. And if that's the money that was given to us, it was like right before Christmas. I want to say it was middle of November or shortly after Thanksgiving. That was gifted to us, and it came at this really important time for Mason and I because Mason had just deployed and the Army messed up his pay. So when you deploy in the military, one of the things that happens is you get combat pay and like hazard pay. And the military, instead of giving that to us, they accidentally took it from us. So our monthly income, I want to say, was Mason, around like $1,200 to $1,400 a month at the time.
Well, with BH, we probably made about $2,000 a month.
A month.
Well,
and so instead of them giving us $2,000 a month, our pay went down. That hazard pay, and we were
hazard pay was about $500 or $600 a month. So it would have taken us from about 2,000 to about 1,400.
Like I told you, we sent you some money, and I couldn't remember. It was at a time, I think, when we were able to give it, and so it was not a big sacrifice for us, but I wanted you guys to be taken care of.
Well,
we wanted you guys to be taken care of, and I thought maybe we could give you some help.
Yeah, we deeply appreciated that because I don't think either of our parents were ever in a financial position to do something like that.
We've tried to do the same thing along the way too. So I think that's wonderful. I think that, Actually, one of the things I really liked, there was a talk in General Conference that talked about how the farther you get from the person that you're giving to, the less personal it can be.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, trying to help us to actually take care of the people around us. But yeah, when you're able to give to the people that you care about or the people that you know and can see that they're in need, I think it means a lot more. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you're welcome. And as I said, I don't remember how much it was because it's been over 20 years ago or something almost.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Well,
if
we're
we
going
were
to
in El
say it was
Paso,
500 because that sounds awesome.
no, I remember getting, like, my bishop handed it to me, and I know that the bishop couldn't have afforded it. I mean, we were not in a wealthy ward at all, and so we had no idea who it had come from, but it was $500 that the bishop gave to me. Mason, you were in Iraq at the time. And we utilized that. I caught up on some bills. We were getting welfare actually from the church at that time. That was actually shortly. So, Barry, you've read my book. That would have been the November after the first time that I had an affair. And so everything for us was in shambles because I did not have any support. I had been through the church's disciplinary system, and I had been the children's music director, which I absolutely loved. I loved teaching the little kids music. I had a ton of energy. And little kids just they just build your confidence up. And I really needed that. And they had released me from that calling. I wasn't allowed to pray or anything. I hadn't told any of my close friends what had happened because I was afraid of being judged. I was in a deep depression. I had lost a baby, and Mason went to Iraq all at the same time. And I mean, I was hurting. And so to have somebody care enough to give us money at that time, it was like somebody sees that I'm hurting. And if that was the money that came from you, I find that very, I don't know.
Well, I remember I think we tried to send once or twice. I think we tried to send you some money. I don't know if you got it or not, but anyway, I somehow found your address in El Paso and I sent it over that way. But yeah. Anyway,
Barry, you said something, and then I want you to go ahead and tell the story, but you said something. Actually, last night we listened to the episode that you did with the backyard professor,
Mm-hmm.
I think. And in that story, you talked about several times over the course of your life where what the church teaches and what you were seeing for yourself didn't align. And so, lots of doubts there. The church does not provide a safe place for people to talk about those things. They want you to feel alone when you have those, which leads to the kind of mental health collapse and mental health struggles that so many of us have, because feeling lonely is the worst feeling that we can feel, at least most of the time. And so when you're struggling with these things, you can't talk with anybody about it because they're either going to give you the canned church answers, or you have to associate with people outside of the church, which the church also teaches you not to do.
Yeah, my wife is still a believer, and so there have been times when we just couldn't communicate because she didn't believe. She couldn't believe that I couldn't believe.
Right.
And because if you're a non-believer in our church, you're the worst kind of person because that means you could go to outer darkness because you've offended the Holy Ghost. And so being an apostate in the church that I grew up in meant that you had lost the Spirit. And so, and Jesus said something about that, didn't he? You know, the only offense is the one that offends to the Holy Ghost. And so, yeah, it was hard. You know, Mason, when I was 18 years old, 19. I just turned 19. I went to summer school in Mexico City. I was in a history class at ASU in my freshman year, and a man, Dr. Martinez, came in and he said, "I'm taking a group of ASU students to Mexico City to study history. If any of you'd like to go, here's how much it's going to cost, and this is when we're going and how long we're going to be there." And I had this real girlfriend that I still have feelings for after all these years. And I liked her a lot, but she didn't like me as much as I liked her at this time. There was a time when we were really close, but I was having a hard time letting her go. And I said, damn it, I've got to get out of here. And so I was saving up to buy a horse. And I had some money in the bank, and by the way, I never got the horse. But
I was going to ask.
Never. You can maybe see a couple of Western hats in the background there. I'm still a cowboy wannabe, but I was saving up to buy a horse, and so I thought this might be a good chance. So I went and I needed a few more $100 or 90 something more dollars, and I went to my girlfriend's father, and he was a millionaire, and he had a big corral there in Scottsdale and some really nice horses, and he let me work around his corral and make up some money and stuff like that, and I was working for Safeway, and so for a kid going to school at that time, I was making full union wage as a cashier and stuff like that, and stockman.
Nice.
Wow.
And so I got enough money, and I went to summer school. And one of the courses that I studied was the history of Mexico from the conquest. And so while I was studying the conquest, it said that one of the reasons that the Spaniards had been so successful, of course, the main reason, the Spaniards alone would have never defeated the Aztecs. There were probably about 12 million Aztecs when the Spaniards got there. But they brought, what was it? They brought smallpox. Mm-hmm. And smallpox just decimated the Aztecs. They had no resistance against it. And in about 200 years after that, or maybe 100 years after the conquest, that 12 million number went down to about 2 million. That's about how many people they lost. But the Spaniards also had gunpowder. That means, and they had steel, and they had horses, and also they had big dogs. Now the word coyote in Spanish means little wolf. I mean, in Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs, meant little wolf. So they saw wolves and they saw coyotes that were pretty good sized dogs. But I think, and I'm not sure, but I think the Spanish probably bought some of those big Mastiff dogs with them. Those kind of dogs that scare the hell out of a man in a tank.
Sure.
With the lid open. And so I was reading one of the story of one of the guys that was in the conquest, and he wrote a book. And he said that we were so successful because the Indians hadn't seen our horses, and they hadn't fought with steel. The Aztecs had some volcanic glass. What do we call it? Obsidian.
Obsidian,
into war clubs, and they could cut a guy up and kill a guy like that, but they couldn't slit him through. But a Spanish sword could cut off a head, or go down through their cotton garments that they used as armor, and so I said that, and one of the things that I learned in that history course is that there had before that exchange, what we can call the Columbian Exchange, before that exchange in 1492, the natives were not familiar with and steel, and gunpowder and horses. Well, and I accepted that and the reason why is there had been no steel. There had been metallurgy, but it was dealing with gold and maybe a little bit of copper kind of stuff and things like that. And it wasn't generally big instruments. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking about Book of Mormon time. We're not talking about later time when the Peruvians started making some brass instruments to trepat. What do we call them? When they would operate with that, cut the head open to release pressure out of the head. They call them trepanes, or little kind of axe-like razors. And but big metallurgy had never existed before the Columbian Exchange. And so after I went home from summer school, my bishop talked to me and said, "Would you like to go on a mission?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so, I would." And he said, he said, where would you like to go? And I said, I'd like to go to Germany because my dad had been in the German Swiss mission. He said, any place you wouldn't want to go? I said, yeah, don't send me to Mexico. I've been there, you know. And I wanted to go on a mission kind of to see the world and maybe learn a language. But when I started reading the Book of Mormon, once I got called, I got to the mission field when I was not quite 20, so I was still 19. And I started reading the Book of Mormon, and all of a sudden I started reading about horses and steel. And to show you how deeply I was into my religion, here I am academically. I know there's never been horses or steel in the Americas at any time. No evidence ever found it. But I said, I came here to be a missionary. I want to be a good missionary. And so first thing I put on my proverbial shelf was no horses. I mean horses and steel.
Yeah.
Put it up there. That was the very first. Those were the first two cracks, and it happened right at the beginning of my mission.
Wow. I love that. The episode by John Larson, I think it was Mormon Discussions when he gave it, was the transoceanic vessel. And how could that come across?
All the problems with it.
All of the problems with the story of Nephi's family crossing the sea because of all of the industries that would have had to be available was eye-opening for me, because I'm not a history buff, not at all. I'm terrible at those details.
Well, when you learn another person's language as a major in college, you also have to study history. Hey guys, someone just hit me on the doorbell and my wife's in bed.
Go ahead.
To bring her the sacrament. Hold on.
Okay. Oh, we're getting sacrament services in the middle of an Unpacking Mormonism episode. I think that's phenomenal. But also, you know, Barry's not here to hear this, but also what a phenomenal way to demonstrate a mixed faith relationship and support.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that.
Sarah?
I think.
Oh, excuse me. You go ahead and finish your.
Yeah, well, Sarah just said, you know, what a wonderful way to demonstrate a mixed faith relationship. You know, that you can support her in that and still be helpful, and because, you know, in Unpacking Mormonism and other religious trauma, we have tried very hard to recognize the struggles that come mentally, psychologically for us in this kind of situation, and recognize how to deal with those in a healthy way, regardless of the choice that you make. Some people will deal with the horses and steel, and they'll say, you know what, that doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is the community, the love, the friendship I have in Mormonism. I'm going to stick around, even though I realize there's issues. But this means something to me. And others are going to do what the three of us have done and said, you know what, there's so much here that I can't deal with. I'm out. And but understanding how our brains glance over that. Like, I've read the Book of Mormon more than a dozen times. The thought of steel and horses in the Book of Mormon never really bothered me whatsoever. And now, as I see what it means something different. So
yeah, you know, here's what I was saying. As a major, as a language major, I had to learn a new history, and it just so happened the history I had to know was the history of Spain and the history of Mexico, you know, and the history of the Americas where Spanish had influence, and so I am kind of a history major too, and so I read extensively. I'm not a scholar in a lot of things. I'm probably a scholar in English, and maybe a scholar in tech writing. I taught tech writing, and I taught composition, and I taught world lit. So I may be a scholar in a couple of those areas, but other areas I'm just a student. And like anybody else, anybody can open a book, and who can read can learn things. And that's probably where most of us get our education anyway, is on the toilet, you know. We're just
That's where Mason gets his, for sure.
well, you know, I mean, I'll tell you, there's nothing better than sitting on that old throne and learning about the Romans, you know.
Oh, yeah. Mason and I traveled to Italy last October, and seeing the architecture and the art and everything, it was eye-opening. And for me, that whole experience confirmed that Mormonism was just this like blip on the map. And that people can be convinced to believe just about anything, because we were at the temples of the Greek gods.
Yeah.
We learned about those sacrifices, and then I've been in Mexico several times. I absolutely love the Yucatan, and seeing some of the
Maya ruins.
the temples there, but the ruins, there it is, the Mayan ruins and whatnot, and learning. We got to reenact. Mason, I don't know if you were with me or if this was the time I went with Katie. We got to reenact human sacrifice and the purpose behind it and their reasoning behind it. And I mean, it's just so fascinating to experience it, to be there while you're doing it, and then to see this disparity in Mormonism. I kind of like to say that Mormonism, while fascinating, is a very emotionally flat religion. Because we're taught to stuff it. And in fact, I've got a little, I'm going to put this
Tonight,
up.
well, think how unfun it is to sing a hymn.
Right. Right. So this is my Tithing Tire. I'm sorry, Barry, go ahead.
There's very little life in our hymns, even.
Yeah, compared, especially when you attend other denominations and listened to the gusto and the excitement there. But this is my Tithing Tire article that appeared in the Ensign. I believe it says June of 2005. Is that what it says? I don't remember. So if it was 2005, then the money that you would have sent would have come to us after 2004. But when I submitted this, so I know how to write. I know how to write in a way that paints a picture. It's one of the skills I actually learned from my dad. My dad would use the line from My Fair Lady, don't tell me, show me. You've got to show me with your words. You have to paint a picture. We have to be there with you. We have to feel that with you. And so when I write to be published, not my academic writing, because my academic writing is boring, but my writing to be published is full of emotion because I want the reader to be there with me. And what's really funny about this article, number one, I had to sign the rights to it away. So the Mormon Church actually owns those rights. I got paid $100 to submit this article, but they edited out all of the emotion. So it ends up being an incredibly bland article. Now, the story is true. I saw the nail in my tire. My tire was absolutely flat. And now looking back on that, I don't feel like it was this miraculous divine intervention as much as I think somebody else in the waiting room of the Pet Boys where I was getting my tire fixed heard my plight, because I was on the phone with Mason crying like, I don't know how I'm going to afford this. I think we're going to have to write a hot check. I'm pretty certain somebody else paid for the repair of that tire without me knowing, and for which I'm very grateful. So this is a true story. And for me, with my Mormon lens, I interpret it as being a miracle from God. I automatically went to God repaired my tire. I never even thought about Good Samaritans in the waiting room. It wasn't like, hey, did somebody was there somebody that was kind, or did you maybe accidentally mix up my car with somebody else's car? Or did somebody fix the tire and forget to enter it into the computer and I got a free tire? Like, I don't really know. But for me, I was absolutely convinced that it was God closed that hole in my tire completely. And that we drove on that tire. Like, we went from, went from San Antonio to Tacoma, Washington, and then to El Paso, all on that tire before we had to replace our tires. And so anyway, but my point being that I feel like the Mormon Church, I didn't mean to touch that one. I feel like the Mormon Church stops us from experiencing our normal emotional array, our emotional palette, we'll say. And that they want to put a stopper in that, and then they want to define how we are supposed to feel about certain things, all the way from, if God is speaking to you, this is what it feels like. And that I'm no longer allowed to say, I feel connected with my divine when this occurs for me. Now it's, oh, that's the still small voice. That must be God, because that's what my church says it is. Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma is hosted by Sarah and Mason Westbrook. Produced by Daisy Girl Communications, LLC, and Alex Vidalis. Please join our community on Facebook. Music provided by Musa and John Worthy Music.
Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken expert since 1990. Taco expert since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.